There's a long list of the minutes from the last meeting. If has everybody had a chance to look at them in the email that we got, or do you need a few minutes to look at them?
I haven't.
Jim,
Oh, yes, I do.
you got them?
Yep.
Okay, does somebody want to make a motion
I'll make a motion
to approve?
to approve the minutes, yeah.
Second?
I'll make a second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Who made the first one?
Jackie.
Jackie.
Jackie. Okay, old business. BW solar variance application. We did have a couple of questions based from the last meeting I want to clear up. The question that came up several times at the last meeting about the escrow account, in the monies that were put aside. Per our attorney, those have not kicked in yet. The time that those are due have not come yet, so we're fine. I think that was the only real thing from the attorney. Okay. I see basically, we have really three options tonight. Option one is the setbacks that have been requested, we approve. Second thing is that the setbacks that have been requested, we deny, or we go through each individual setback and see if there's any changes that we agree as a board that we recommend. Does anybody see any other options that we have?
Just one quick point though, can we take action on this with the town board still having to deal with the valuation issue?
Yes. Yes. We can either grant or deny the request, make changes to the request, then it's still going to have to go to the board. So is there any thoughts on which option we head down?
Well, this might be somewhat of a rhetorical question, but I assume that any increase in the setback or is going to, to more favorable setback is going to make the project undoable. I mean, is that or do you, I mean, I know there's a certain size you have to have in order to make this thing financially feasible. But if, like, just picking one, if there's a 200 setback required, you're asking for 100. If you move more towards 200, obviously that impacts your solar arrays and.
Yeah, so for Genesee 5, which is the more northern one, it's up where the bend of the road is. We do actually have enough land to accommodate the 200-foot setback around the entire parcel. Genesee 6 has more constraints in terms of the available land there to still allow the woods to have their cattle option, cattle farm. So Genesee 5 could function without getting any of the variances for the 200-foot setback. The purpose for the setback is looking at the town's law and hearing the comments that we heard from folks previously, was that having solar closer to the road was something people did not like or want. So for Genesee 5 specifically, the one that's a little bit further north, reducing a 200-foot setback to 100 feet pulls it further away from the road towards an agricultural field. That doesn't have to be granted. I think it fits better within the makeup of that main road and what the town has said that they would prefer. It's pulling it more to the center of that large property and away from the road. So that's the one variance where we're going from 200 to 100 on Genesee 5. The other variance on Genesee 5 is asking for the 200-foot setback along the middle property line to go to 0, because that property is owned by the woods on both sides. And if there's a 200-foot setback there, you're creating a 400-foot gap down the middle of two arrays, when in all honesty, I think everyone would agree, condense it next to each other rather than spreading it out further actually uses the property better. It allows you to farm along the main road, which is another visual buffer. And it's not an additional waste of space that the landowners can't really use in between, because we're gonna have buffers outside of the fence that we have to maintain as part of, insurance and liability to make sure that grasses don't grow. So some of these variances that we're asking for is purely to meet the intent of what I've heard the town say. If there's a solar project here, we'd like it as far away from the road as possible. Others, like on Genesee 6, are needed for the space in order to accommodate it on that specific parcel of land.
I guess this is a question I have. Are you all set, Tim?
Well, yeah, I think I'm just trying to answer your question of the three options. I mean, I guess, one option would be to go through each of the variances, have some dialogue as to, is there any room, isn't there any room, if there isn't, why, document that. Because obviously this is a very sensitive subject, and depending on which way the board goes, it'd be good to have that rationale, I suppose,
Right.
behind why each of the variances are either, not that it's our job to get into re-engineering or negotiating, but I think, if there's an opportunity to,
Well, I
less of the
mean,
variance.
it is to a certain extent the negotiation part, yes. I mean, anytime somebody comes in front of us for a variance request to negotiate, to a certain extent, yes.
I'm happy to go through each of them, because in the very back end of the packet, I did provide two maps showing what the 200-foot setback requirement looks like as an overlay to the project. And then the second map that I provided is what the 200-foot buffer for the 1,000-foot residential piece looks like, extending, if these variances are granted, what that would look like extending from the edge of the solar array.
The question I have for the woods, these are two separate pieces of property with two separate tax stamp numbers, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So in theory, if it was all one piece of property, the 0 that you're asking for between the two solar arrays
Wouldn't even be.
it wouldn't even be here as an issue.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. That's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure.
And there's not a hedgerow between the property line.
I've toured it once,
Right.
but trying to remember everything, touring it once and looking at the map is two
You're welcome
separate
to come to
things.
it again. If you want to know, welcome to come out and walk it and see it. And,
We almost got stuck the first time.
well, you got your boots. You got
No, I mean, the truck almost got stuck.
Well, I wouldn't take the truck down there. I would just walk it.
But the other thing too, I was just
The
thinking,
group in the truck were too lazy to walk. I was a passenger.
if you look at the criteria that has to be applied to this, I guess I'm thinking that if we go through each variance, again, whether depending, how the board members feels, but I think it would help answer that first question of the criteria too. The other means feasible, because,
Right.
either there is room or there isn't room to negotiate, I guess.
Right.
I kind of like his idea. I think that whatever our decision is, it will be upheld a lot better if we go through them one by one.
No, I don't disagree. I think that's.
But we're gonna need really good minutes.
Well,
You do have two folks that record every meeting, so that always helps.
oh, okay. Solar 5. Make sure I got the right one. First setback request is 200-foot setback from non-residential property line to 100 for the section of the northern property line of Genesee 6. Did you bring your, by any chance, did you bring your big map tonight?
I did not.
You did not, okay.
Apologize.
That's okay. That's okay.
So in Genesee 5, the one you just read off, is that the easternmost property line?
Easternmost one of my notes, yeah. I think.
Wait,
Jesse 5, variance number 1 is the easternmost property.
100 foot from the east, yeah, easternmost.
Okay.
That's what I have here.
So, yep, so if you look at the first map that I provided, it is right here in this L. Again, the intention here is the gray area is buildable area that we can use. So the green is showing how a 200-foot setback would actually require us to move 2 to 3 rows of panels. The only place for that to go is, instead of it being in the middle of a field, it would have to go over here to the west and right by the main road. So the reason for this setback going from 200 to 100 is it's pulling it further away from the road, the main road, and pulling it further into this area, which is currently farmed in corn. So the back side of this property right now is actually farmed with corn by the woods. They don't own that piece of land, but they farm it. So back here is all going to be filled in with corn, and we'd be pulling the array closer to the corn and further away from the road. Additionally, I talked to Donald Hawkins. His home is right up here as well.
Correct.
If the panels, so if the variance back here is not granted, those panels come further up here and again impede his view even more. So it's an attempt to try and maintain as much of this open field up here by the main road so that the woods can farm it with corn. It adds additional visual barrier, and it provides anyone along this road with a more scenic view, at least the most scenic view we can offer them. Given where the panels will be.
This other piece of property is owned by Thomas.
Lambert.
Has anybody had any feedback from him whatsoever? I mean, he got a notice to come to the,
But he didn't come to the public hearing.
no, I'm saying he didn't come to the public hearing. I don't know, I just didn't know
He doesn't live on that property,
It used to be owned by Harry and Rena Wolcott.
right, which was an aunt and uncle of his.
if, okay. Oh, they're the ones that own the farm that's in the bend, that the house and the barn that's been sitting there empty for as long as I can remember.
Yes.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
I have a question. He was talking about the barrier is gonna be the corn is gonna block it from any kind of view, but the corn's only there like 2 months a year at height. I mean, July it's knee high, and after that, in September, you cut it down, so. I mean,
Well, I don't think you really said that the corn was gonna be.
No, it's an additional visual barrier. We'll have a full screening plan that goes around it, including trees and bushes as well. So they'll probably be about 40 feet from, they'll be 20 feet from the actual array to the fence, security fence. From the security fence, there'll probably be another 20 feet to where the actual screening starts. That'll cover another 20 feet in itself. So there's about 40 feet from the fence to the edge of the screening, and then you have corn in the front.
I just need to take a note here for a second.
And then how far away is it from the street?
Up in the front, we have roughly, I believe the last measurement was like 560 feet to the edge of the fence in the front of the road. But again, to that point, if the 100-foot variance isn't granted on the back, there's 100 feet of panels coming up to the front and cutting into that setback in the front. Which, to be completely honest, if we can avoid going to multiple boards and build within your zoning law, it's easier for me as a product developer. It's one less approval I have to get. I thought it was important to pull this away from the road as much as possible, which is why we requested the variance, because I thought that's what the town wanted.
Does anybody here on the board have any other questions on the first one? Okay.
So do we, so
Well-
will you entertain a motion for each variance as we go, so that it's fresh in our mind?
Yeah, I
do you
think we
want-
should, because there's no sense of waiting and doing it at the end and then,
Yeah, we'll have to
And it's gonna-
rehash it again.
yeah, well,
It's
and
gonna
then,
be fresh.
yes, yes.
All right, I make a motion to approve variance request number 1, because it will pull the construction of the project further from the road, closer to an agricultural use field, and allow additional visual buffers from the road, and result in approximately 560 feet from the edge of the road to the project. And also because the neighboring property owner, by the last name of Lambert, has not expressed any concern about it being closer to his property.
Can I have a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, well, you prepared to do a roll call vote on each one?
Do that. Tim?
Approve. We'll move to approve.
Krista?
Approve.
Jim?
Approved.
Mike?
Yes.
Jackie?
Yes.
Approved 5-1. Or 5-0.
Yep. Request 2 on solar 5, reduction of the 200-foot setback from non-residential property line
Down for me.
to a-
That's a lot.
I'll make a copy.
Okay.
to 100 feet for the portion of the southern property line separating Genesee 6 parcel land and lands of Brian C. Thompson. Okay. Show us on the map exactly what we're talking.
You just, was that setback variance 2?
Yes.
Yes,
For the southerly line separating 5 and 6.
yep.
Okay, you said, you read it as from 200 to 100, and that's from 200 to 0.
No, this says 200 to 100.
Are you on 5?
He's on the far east.
I have 200 to 0.
Oh, okay, wrong, I'm sorry, I'm on 6.
I think it's not difference.
Okay, 200 to 0 for the southeastern property line separating Genesee 5 parcel from Genesee 6 project parcel.
So again, the request here is this is right along the property line. The woods own both sides of it. Typically, what we see in a town is there's language in the law that says when the neighboring property is owned by the same owner, that those type of rules don't apply. When we went to the county, they made similar comments at the county planning board that you can issue the variance, it's well within your right. Typically, what they see is the town has a provision in their law, as I just mentioned. That's not in the solar law. So there's no language to say if you own 2 pieces of land that are next to each other, that this 200-foot setback does not apply to your 2 pieces of land. So the most direct and simple way to do it is to ask for a variance to reduce it down to 0. Again, this only applies to, the variance you grant me is only if we do solar. That doesn't transfer to other buildings or other projects.
No.
I would have to come back, so you can't bait and switch. I know that's a concern in some towns where you get a variance from 200 to 0 and then you go build something else. Doesn't work that way. It's only for solar and what we're proposing. And the intent, again, is in this green area, if this variance is not granted, there would be 200 feet on either side of that property line where we couldn't build solar. And for Genesee 5, again, those panels would come up here to the west in the only buildable area that we have left. So again, bringing it back to the road. Our goal for asking for the 0-foot variance is that we can put a road right down the middle of this It's one of the most efficient ways we can do it, so that we don't have gravel roads going on either side. Goes right down the middle, less construction, less gravel roads being built. It's very streamlined, they can share fences, and it consolidates, again, the project as much as we can to the middle area and away from other critical pieces of the property, like the woods, cattle here, and allows us to leave a corridor here for the stream and trees that are currently there. So this one is slightly different than the variance, the first variance. This one is kind of mission critical. If we don't get this, it's gonna have a large impact on the project. And it makes the construction and viability of this a lot better by moving them closer to each other. Another option that we looked at was going to the county and adjoining these properties into one. The county actually said they prefer if we didn't do that, because it's more work for them to get a new parcel ID. They have to register it on the deed, and it just takes a while for all of that to happen.
Well, yes. I mean, the first step is that the woods would have to go to the planning board also, and then to the county, so.
And in all honesty, the utility company prefers that we don't co-locate 5 megawatt arrays on the same parcel of land, because at the end of the day, the county is going to issue a separate tax IDs to those arrays. So by keeping it on 2 parcels of land, actually makes it streamlined for the county for tax purposes as well. But that was a thought out way of how we could get around the 200-foot setback if it wasn't something the town was willing to grant.
Could you show us where the Lambert property is?
It is right here in this L. It's right there, and then there's an abandoned house right up here where the road bends around. And outside of these two, these are 2 of the only other properties that are actually zoned commercial industrial park.
I had thought when I looked on the map that the curve there was the curve where the house, the Lockett house, the Lambert property is. So,
Yep, that's right up here in the very tip of the curve. Curve comes up like this. The house is here, and this is an open farm field that the Woods Harvest Corps.
Does anybody on the board have any other questions for this one? Does somebody want to make a motion on this?
Yeah, I'll make the motion. Looking that we approve variance number 2, which is a 200-foot setback from non-residential property line to 0 foot. This is the southern line separating lots 5 and 6. Again, this variance is for Genesee 5. In making the motion to approve, it's my opinion that if the variance was not granted, that this would affect or impact the viability of the project for Genesee 5 and 6. As was stated by the applicant, having this corridor as an access road between the 2 parcels will be advantageous to service the property when required. And as it turns out, unfortunately, our town code does not have any language in it that would eliminate this 200-foot requirement when it is owned by the same property owners. So for those reasons, I feel that approving this would be justified.
Second to this?
I'll approve.
Second.
Yes.
Ready for
Jim?
Jim?
Okay. Roll call again.
Yep.
Tim?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, approved.
Crystal?
Approve.
Jim?
Approve.
Jackie?
Approve.
And Mike?
Yes. Request 3, reduction of 1,000-foot setback from residential property lines to 200 for the entirety of the project area.
So the 1,000-foot setback piece, again, is unique to the town of Stafford. There are very few towns in New York State that have a 1,000-foot setback from residential. I've seen it in several other towns, and it's predominantly intended to drastically reduce where solar can go. And in certain circumstances, it does offer itself well to making sure solar is built in an area that the town wants it. But typically, those are towns that don't have zoning and already identified areas for solar. What Stafford has in their comprehensive plan is several identified areas and parcels that allow for solar. And on a previous map that I shared with this board, it would reduce the usable acreage of these two parcels, which totals about 120 acres and change, down to, I believe it was about 6 acres on the GENESEE 5 site and less than 4 acres on the GENESEE 6 site. So it in essence makes solar not viable on a commercial size. So our request is reducing that. If you look at the second map that I provided, if all of the variances tonight were granted and the array was to stay in the exact position it is now, the green area with the red dotted line shows that at no point on this entire facility is a residential property within 200 feet of the array, even with all the variances we are asking for to bring it closer to non-residential property lines. This includes the only residents that are across the street that are currently occupied. Those are the closest adjoining residents, and that would be Mr. Hawkins. So we're still meeting a pretty high setback threshold. 200 feet is higher than what NYSERDA suggests as a setback. So we're still meeting that around the entire parcel, both of them. 1,000 feet would make it next to impossible to have solar on these parcels or a majority of the parcels in the town of Stafford. So again, our request is to bring that down from 1,000 feet to 200 feet, and that would apply around the entire parcel.
What does 500 feet do for you?
We haven't studied it yet, but I can tell you it would drastically change the shape and look of the array. It would most likely shrink it from the 5 megawatts that it is now to something significantly smaller. At that point, given the cost of our interconnection, we would have to look at whether or not it's still viable to do the project, because the utility company tells us exactly how much it's going to cost to connect. And in all honesty, if we shrank the size of these, it may open up capacity for other solar projects. And people may see that there's capacity online and come to you with a new proposal 6 months from now and try to get that remaining capacity. My hope is that we can use it up on these two parcels. I feel a 500-foot setback would be so large that it would again chew up a majority of the property for use.
Where would that affect the rest of the town?
This isn't a public hearing.
Oh, I'm asking.
No, this
It's
is
not a
not a
question?
public, this
Oh,
is not
okay.
a public hearing. Questions from anybody else?
No.
No?
Is he using the width of the road, however, to be part of the 200 setback,
The center line of the road
center line? of
is the
road?
definition for where you start the setback from.
So that's 40 feet of roadway out of that 200.
So only certain people can ask questions, I guess? It's-
I'm sorry.
Was it
What's
a
that?
question?
Yeah, she was just asking a question. The 40 feet from the center of the road. Yeah,
Yes, that is part of it.
I mean, any roadside setback starts at the center of the road. Okay, does anybody want to make a motion one way or the other on this one?
I'll move that we approve variance number 3, again for Genesee parcel number 5. Making the motion to approve is my belief that the 200-foot setback that the applicant has showed on in his map provides an adequate buffer. It was noted that 200 feet is higher than what NYSERDA recommends. I think that's an important point to point out. A 1,000-foot setback would make the project next to impossible to carry on with. It also should be noted that discussion was around would a 500-foot setback be possible, and that again would shrink the project down and also may not make it viable. So it's my belief that for those reasons that this variance is justified to support the project of the applicant.
Second on this motion,
I'll second that.
roll call.
Tim,
Approved?
Crystal,
Approve.
Jim,
Approved.
Jackie,
Approve.
and Mike.
No, not approved.
Motion passed 4-1.
Okay. Fence, the next request is fence height limitation in the rear, front, and side yards. No fence shall be more than 6 feet high at the rear yard, side yard of the homes or buildings situated in the town of Stafford. That's no fence or portions of fence shall be higher than 3 feet in the front. That's our current code. You are requesting 7 feet.
Yes, so we have the same exact issue down in Pavilion. We have a 5-megawatt project being approved down there. The request here is basically the National Electric Code is the one that says a 7-foot fence is what should be used for safety requirements. I know this is a little bit of splitting hairs, but for insurances and liability, we do have to have a 7-foot fence to follow the National Electric Code. So our request is that we can increase the height of the fence from 6 feet, and it's a chain link fence, from 6 feet to 7 feet. In here, one of the suggestions it makes is adding an extra foot of potential barbed wire. As I mentioned earlier, I think that is a little bit aggressive and ugly looking. My suggestion to the board would be that it's just an extension of the regular chain link fence, so it doesn't look like, you know, a detention center or something, you know, nefarious. So the request here is to have the fence be 7 feet, so we can follow the National Electric Code rather than 6 feet.
Now, the natural, that you're gonna, you know, the trees, whatever you're gonna put, are gonna be on the outside of this fence?
Yes.
Okay, so they'll be between roadways and the fence?
Correct.
Okay.
And how far approximately off the roadway would the vegetation of the fence be?
So the vegetation, the screening plan would be roughly 20 to 30 feet outside of the fence. It could be a little bit closer, but typically we like to have about 20 feet in between the fence and the panels and the fence and anything outside of it. So we would have a landscape architect design what that would specifically look like. We would call it out in the site plan as to how many trees, what their height will be when we plant them, what they'll grow into. We actually had a visual rendering of that done. It's being worked on right now as part of the site plan. But that would be on the outside of the fence and would grow in over the course of the project's life.
And from the road though, I mean, how far back is this gonna be set back from the road, the fence is it 100 feet off the road?
Well, I
So
think you'd have to go, but like, so,
Panels will never be closer than 200 feet to the road. So if you, at the
Yeah,
edge of a
like it
panel is
to- yeah.
200 feet for the setback, take 20 feet, then you have the
that's the
fence.
fence,
Okay.
and then 20
So the
more
fence would be
feet.
180 feet.
Okay. I guess my point, what I was thinking is the average person driving by is not gonna be able to tell the difference between the 6 foot and the 7 foot fence, especially when it's screened the way that you're talking about.
Sure.
I think it's far enough back.
Well,
I
and
mean,
it's
go ahead.
a chain link fence also,
Yeah.
not a,
Right.
you
A
know.
picket fence or a vinyl.
Right,
fence.
right.
Looking at the map, that closest spot is just a real short section, and I would think it would be 160 feet,
Right.
180 for the chain link, and it's a very short section. Anything else would be greater, up to almost 450, 500 feet.
Right. Okay. Any other questions on the fence? Does somebody want to make a motion on this?
I'll make a motion to approve the fence height variance requested for Genesee Solar 5 from 6 feet to 7 feet to comply with National Electric Code Section 110.31 for safety of residents and the project.
Second,
One second.
roll call. Walt?
Second, I'm sorry.
Second, Tim,
Yes.
okay. Tim,
Approved.
Krista,
Approve.
Jim,
Approved.
Jackie,
Approve.
Mike,
Yes, approved.
passed 5-0.
Okay. Genesee 6. Variance 1 request, reduction of the 200-foot setback from non-residential property line to 100 for a section of the northern property line of Genesee 6 project.
So this variance, again, is similar to that of the very first variance request for Genesee 5. This butts up again to the cornfield, it's the northern section here. With 6, we have a little bit more of a buildable area constraint than we do with 5. 6 has a natural stream going through it, which we would like to preserve as a natural corridor for animals, and also not impact the hydrology there. So in order to have as much buildable space in this back area and still allow the woods to have their cattle field in the front, we are asking that we pull this from 200 to 100 feet again towards the agricultural field owned by the laborers.
Same people.
Yep.
Does anybody have any questions on this one? Motion?
I'll move to approve variance number 1 for Genesee 6. I think we can use pretty much the same language we used for
Yes, it's the same.
Genesee 5,
Right.
unless you see anything different that's unique that we can come up with.
I mean, it's the same property, it's the same, it's just,
The part
Different
about the
side.
neighboring property has not expressed any concern.
Who would second it?
I don't think we had a second.
we haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay.
All right, so if the rest of the board's comfortable with that, I'd say we'll just replicate what we did for
Okay.
Genesee 5, variance 1.
Yep.
I'll second. Jim?
Before I vote, can I just add that
Sure.
it protects the stream?
Sure.
Allows a buffer around the stream.
Do you have that in your notes?
It will be.
Okay.
If you guys are okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Roll call, Tim,
Approved?
Krista,
Approve.
Jim,
Yes, approved.
Jackie,
Approved.
and Mike.
Yes.
Passed 5-0.
Request 2, reduction of the 200-foot setback from non-residential property line to 100 for a portion of the southern property line separating Genesee 6 to lands of Brian C. Thompson. This you're gonna have to show us on that.
Sure, this is a similar request. This is along the bottom here. So what we have here is there's actually a cluster of trees over here in the bottom left corner of the property, and then this is the woods cattle field. Again, this is an agricultural field that has a railroad track going along back. There are no residential properties in this back area, except for across the railroad tracks, and even still, that's over 200 feet from the very edge of this array. So with the limited space we have back here, we're asking that go from 200 to 100 feet, again, for the same reason as this corner up here. It's an agricultural field. It's not within any residential limits. There's a railroad track that goes along the back side of it as well, and makes the construction of that in the very back end of the property more viable.
Who currently farms this?
Brian?
Brian does? Again, obviously, we haven't heard from him on this.
He doesn't live there.
Oh.
He lives in Alexandria.
Does anybody that owns property on that road live there?
No, they don't want solar over
It's so far
there.
out back, I mean, it's out, if you go across the creek, it's like, you're talking way out back going towards the railroad.
Yeah,
There's no, it's all field, it's all,
I think this is where we got stuck.
that's kind of where.
I'm pretty sure.
Right, you know, there's nobody out there, it's all tree lines, and tree lines going towards 33, like, it's not very visible, it's,
Just wondering, is Brian Thompson Jeff Thompson's son?
he is,
Okay.
yes, it is.
Any questions? No, sir? No questions? Does somebody want to make a motion?
It's just hard for me to make
That's
motions
okay.
and
I
like
know.
them.
So I'll move that we approve variance number 2 for Genesee 6, which is reducing a 200-foot setback from a non-residential property line to 100 feet. Again, this just for clarity, this is the southerly property line. Correct?
Yes.
In my opinion, based on the facts that I've heard, that there are no residential properties adjacent to this area. There is actually a rail line on the back side of the property, which actually does create a very nice border, a buffer for the area. And I'd say more importantly, allowing this variance to be granted would make this section of the solar array much more buildable and viable for the applicant's purpose.
Because that's important.
Second to this?
I'll second it.
Roll call vote, Tim,
Approved.
Krista,
Approve.
Jim,
Approved.
Jackie,
Approve.
Mike,
Yes, approved.
passed 5-0.
Request 3, reduction of the 200-foot setback from non-residential property line to 50 for a portion of the southeastern property line adjacent to the lands of the New York Central Railroad. I have reached out to the contact that we have for the New York Central twice. After getting kicked around to about 10 different phone numbers and left messages, no one ever returned my calls, so obviously, if they're concerned about this, they certainly haven't expressed any concern. Anybody else have any?
No, I'd just like to hear, I guess,
Yeah, again, this was a very natural area where we thought we could, definitely push this array closer to this structure and this property line. Obviously, it is a railroad track. It's raised up off the ground. It has tree lines on either side of it. It creates a very natural buffer, visually as well. So our thought was if we can push this as close to that railroad track as possible, it has the same intention as all the others. It's pulling it away from the road and giving us a buildable area without impacting the natural features that are back there, which are some of the trees, waterway, things of that nature. So we've done work with railroad tracks all across New York State. We do directional drilling underneath them to get our wires across where they don't let us go above. We have easements going above and put in traffic signage when we have an easement crossing it with construction equipment or just maintenance equipment. I can say with 99.9% certainty the railroad company will not have any issue with us being next to their property line. I'm sure we could go right up to the edge of our property line, and as long as we don't impact their operation, they're not going to have an issue with it or cross onto their property. So I think this is the most logical and easiest of all the variances because it does butt right up to the railroad track, and nothing's typically going to get built that close to a railroad track.
You're not gonna have to put anything underneath or over this, right?
No, it's all coming from the Brighton Stafford Town Line Road and going back all underground. And the wiring actually goes to the road here and then to the panels. So back there won't be any wiring by the edge of the property.
Questions?
I'll make a motion to approve GENESEE Solar 6 Variance Request 3 to reduce the 200-foot setback from non-residential property line to 50 foot for a portion of the southeastern property line adjacent to New York Central Lines LLC. Because the railroad creates natural buffer, pulls the project further from the road. Also because Chairman Lathan made multiple attempts to get in contact with New York Central Lines LLC, and because BEW Solar has worked successfully and harmoniously with the railroad for other projects and does not anticipate a conflict.
Second?
I'll second.
Roll call, Tim,
Approved?
Krista,
Approve.
Jim,
Approved.
Jackie,
Approve.
Passed 5-0.
Variance request 4, reduction of the 200-foot setback from non-residential property line to 0 for a portion of the northwestern property line adjacent to lands of Michelle Wood and proposed lands of Genesee 5 solar array.
So this is the same as Genesee 5 setback number 2, same exact logic. It reduces wasted land from a setback law that didn't have a provision to allow for co-owned or land owned by the same person to avoid this setback. So without this setback, the Genesee 6 site would not be viable because it would push so far into the developable area. This site would not be feasible. Also, as I mentioned before, our goal is to share the resources of a common road and fencing to consolidate the site design as much as possible.
Can you just reread? Can
Yeah.
I just reread that one?
Questions from anybody?
No.
Motion?
I'll make a motion to approve Genesee Solar 6 setback variance request for 200-foot setback from non-residential property line to 0 for a portion of the northwestern property line adjacent to lands of Michelle Wood and proposed lands of Genesee 5 solar array, because if not granted, it'll impact the viability for the project 5 and 6, and this will allow a corridor road that both projects can share, and because our town code does not have language exempting owners from setbacks of their own property.
Second?
I'll second.
Jack.
Yeah, Jack.
Roll call, Tim.
Approve?
Krista.
Approve.
Jim.
Approved.
Jackie.
Approve.
Mike.
Yes, approved.
Passed 5-0.
Variance request 5, reduction of 1,000-foot setback from residential property lines to 200 for the entirety of the project area.
So similar to Genesee 5, the current law states 1,000-foot setback from residential properties. As I mentioned before, that is far and above what NYSERDA suggests as a guideline. It's also something we don't typically see throughout New York State. In this specific instance, for Genesee 6, the railroad track does come along the backside and already provide a natural, well not natural, but man-made and natural barrier with the trees and the elevated platform of the railway. If you look at the second map I provided with the green and the red dotted line, you'll see even where the 50-foot, well, we did grant the 50-foot variance, but with the 50-foot reduction to 50 feet along the railroad track, even at 200-foot buffer, it still does not reach the residential property lines. There's still a field in between that. So the closest residential property is outside of the 200-foot buffer as well. Just eyeballing it, looks like there's probably another 50-plus feet in that southeastern corner to the closest property. So to allow for the project to have a uniform setback, we're asking for the 200-foot for this one as well, because anything greater would reduce the buildable acreage that we could use and make Genesee 6 not viable because it doesn't have the same amount of space that Genesee 5 has.
I'm just looking at this here. The residences along through there, where do they actually start?
So if you look at the very first map, you can see the actual property boundaries. So you have the railroad tracks going along back, and then there's actually 2 farm fields. And I believe the woods, actually, do you guys farm those as well?
No,
No, okay.
Who farms those?
Brian, Thompson,
Are you looking at the west side now?
are you looking at the
Or are you
south?
looking at the
South
thirty-three
side.
side?
Down here, yeah,
Southeast corner,
yeah.
and if you go just over the railroad tracks, there's still two fields
Yeah,
back here.
yeah.
There is a field on the east side of the railroad tracks that we work, if that's the house
Yeah.
you're talking, yes, yes, I'm sorry.
So yeah, when you go under the railroad track bridge, and then to the right, there's an
Yes.
entrance that you guys use.
The house that he's talking is across the railroad, on the east side of the railroad.
It looks like there might be one structure there.
Yeah, it doesn't look like the house
So
is
it's not big
starting.
enough to be a house.
No,
I think the houses are up in here.
that's what it looks like on this map.
And I haven't actually been back there to see how high the railroad track's at, but it's probably gonna be higher than
It's
the,
pretty high. They build it up. pretty
well,
quick,
because it's
so.
so swampy through there.
Any other questions? Someone wanna make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve variance number 5. I'd like to use the same language that we did for variance number 3 on Genesee 5, with a couple of additions to that. One being that the railroad does provide both a man-made and natural barrier. I'd also like to note that the closest residential property is well outside a 200-foot buffer, and without this variance, developing Genesee 6 would not be a viable project for the applicant.
Second? I'll second.
Jim?
Yes.
Okay, Tim, roll call.
Approve?
Crystal,
Approve.
Jim,
Approve.
Jackie,
Approve.
and Mike.
Yes, approve.
Pass 5-0.
Last variance request is the same fence, requesting a 7-foot fence. Ordinance, town ordinance has a 6-foot max.
Same thing as Genesee 5, it's the National Electric Code that requires us to do that for safety reasons, to prevent non-authorized personnel from accessing it. In all honesty, I don't know what an extra foot's gonna do if someone's determined to get in there, but that's the code that they have. And so we would ask that would be raised from 6 to 7.
And as you stated earlier, just want to make sure, you mentioned the barbed wire situation. Do we have to build that in as a condition that that fence shall not have barbed wire top, or is that just something,
You can.
I just
That's what the national code says, that if that extra foot can be fence, or it could be 3, it says it right in here, in a combination, and then, and a 1-foot section, more extensions utilizing 3 or more strands of barbed wire or equivalent. I just think that's ugly, aggressive.
We can just make
if you want it,
motion as
we'll
a
obviously do it.
continuation of the chain link fence.
Yes, yeah, just, it gets to be the safe side, because, the less institutional this could be made.
I completely agree.
A motion on this?
So I'll move to approve variance number 6 for Genesee 6 Using the same language that we did for variance number 5. On Genesee 5, variance number 4, for Genesee 5. The only addition to that I would like to make is that the 7-foot fence should be all chain link with no barbed wire attachments to the top of the fence.
Did you say resolution 5?
I said, same as variance number 4 for Genesee 5.
Genesee 5.
Yeah, same language, just with that addition
Thanks, Tim.
regarding the barbed wire fence.
Okay, gotcha. Second.
Second,
I'll second.
Jackie.
Okay. Roll call vote, Tim,
Approved?
Krista,
Approve.
Jim,
Approved.
Jackie,
Approved.
and Mike.
Yes, approved.
Passed 5-0.
How many of these do?
One bonus.
You got it.
Okay. Okay, Chairman Latham would like me to walk us through the area variance findings and decision. I'm gonna fill out, do you want me to fill out 2 separate ones, or can I just list them both?
I think we can fill out one.
Okay. I'll do that later. Sorry.
I just want to.
Oh, okay.
So I hate to be a stickler, but I know our attorney will yell at me. Technically, they are 2 separate projects,
Okay.
so we would need one for each, just to follow the true
Okay.
letter of the law. I
Okay.
know it's a pain in the butt.
Well, basically, they're gonna be the same thing anyways. There's no real
Yeah,
difference
it's,
between the two.
we'll just go through them twice.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll start with you. Hang on. I just need to get the numbers. If I can find them. So this is variance number 8521. What was the date our hearing was held?
A month ago, does anybody have the March, 21st?
Yeah, I think it was the 21st.
21st.
Yeah.
Do you have the date it was published in the paper?
Walt, do you have a copy of that?
Not with me.
And this is zoned commercial, correct?
Industrial.
Industrial.
I have.
Then this application is not have the right box checked. It's checked in commercial.
It's one of only 2 industrial, it's actually an industrial park.
Whoever fills these out needs to be more careful, because it is a little confusing, because it's the type and then the box, and they misconstrued it and did box and then type. Let me see if they're both wrong.
I'm sure they're probably the exact same thing.
Okay.
No. Copy that you had here doesn't say when it was actually in the paper.
It can be added later.
Yeah, I can put it in there.
Okay, whether undesirable changes would be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties.
Hmm.
There's some language around that.
I would like to just say yes or no and then say refer to the motions made for
Yeah, we can.
the reasons.
We can just attach that to this.
Okay.
I suppose you could embellish it by just saying that applicant has provided a natural vegetation and screening plan to try to minimize the
Impact.
impact. Thank you, that's the right word, right?
How about natural vegetation screening plan in compliance with national standards? National and state standards?
Mhm.
I would also add that some of the variances allow for the retention of agricultural lands to the most applicable, because that was the intention of a majority of the variances.
Okay, well, number 2, whether benefits sought by applicant can be achieved by a feasible alternative to the variance.
Answer to that is no.
Yeah, we basically walk
Through it. We said several times the project is not constructible, is that word, constructible? Without the.
Feasible is okay?
It's not feasible, that's better word. Feasible without the variances that have been requested and approved.
Whether the requested variance is substantial.
I'd say yes.
Yes.
I would say just because it's more than 50% of.
Well, I'd say yes, and maybe, but it's mitigated by the fact that these variances are needed to make the project a viable solar farm array. That right term, solar farm array?
I should have brought a more comfortable pen.
It's called a keyboard.
You probably didn't know you were gonna be writing all night.
Number 4, would the variance have an adverse impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood?
I'd say no, and that the applicant has gone to great lengths to ensure that any physical or environmental effects are
Minimal.
minimal.
Right.
Thank you.
I mean, they've even taken into consideration buffers around the stream, that there isn't even any language to follow, just
Right.
common sense. And number 5, whether the alleged difficulty was self-created.
You have to say yes, just because that's hard, that's a hard one too.
That's always a hard one.
You know,
I would argue the answer is no, because the town law is the one that creates the hardship. If the standards of New York State for solar were applied, that wouldn't be an issue for NYSERDA guidelines. But because the town law does go far and above what the average town has, the zoning requires us to be in that area, and then the law brings those additional hardships. If we were allowed to build in another area with larger plots of land, then we may not have those hardships. But because the town zoning dictates this is where solar is allowed, and then the laws are overlaid on top of that, those hardships are gonna be felt by any parcel of land that's zoned properly for solar.
I would strongly agree with that statement.
You can't have a previous statement. Okay.
Yeah, so, to summarize a reason, it was, I don't know, do you want me to put a reason in there?
It's created by the solar laws, right?
The local solar law?
Strict, no, there are the strict solar laws that.
Outline, yeah.
Okay. And, the ZBA, after taking into consideration the 5 factors from page 1, finds that the benefit to the applicant does outweigh the detriment to the neighborhood or community. And that wants reasons again, so I'll just say, see page 1 and,
Which would just be part of the package that goes, stays in the file.
and motions made for each request. That list reasons.
Motion's made and approved for each request.
Okay. That contains supporting reasoning. And we really didn't make any conditions.
Other than the fact of the fence.
Okay.
That was the only condition that we made, is that the fence
Okay.
be a continuation of the fence. That way, if we put it in both of them, then it's
Yeah.
there.
Do we need another vote?
I'm not sure what we'd be voting on, because we already did the record.
Yeah,
Yeah, we went through each individual variance,
okay,
which will be part of the package.
okay.
Okay. Believing that, that takes care of old business.
No, we gotta do number 6.
Oh. I thought we were just gonna copy the one from number 5.
I don't know if we should do that.
What's that?
I don't know if we should. You just gotta sign that. And then can I have it back?
Yeah, you
Sorry.
can have it back, so you can basically copy the same thing. Just go through the questions.
Okay. Okay. For Genesee Solar 6, whether undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties. With permission of the board, I will just duplicate from number Genesee Solar 5. Here. Whether benefits sought by applicant can be achieved by a feasible alternative to the variances. With the approval of the board, I will copy from number 5.
Correct.
Whether the requested variance is substantial, we said yes, and if the board is in favor, I will copy from number 5.
Correct.
Number 4, would the variance have an adverse impact on physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood? We said no, and with approval of the board, I will just copy from number 5.
Correct.
And whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, we said no, and I was going to copy from number 5 with the board's approval.
Correct.
And the final determination was that the benefit to the applicant does outweigh the detriment to the neighborhood or community. And I'd like to copy the verbiage from number 5 with permission of the board.
Correct.
And add a condition that the 7-foot fence should be chain link and not have barbed wire on top.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, now, that ends old business. New business. Application by Evan Cleveland to build a pole barn on property at 6205 East Bethany Leroy Road that has no primary residence on the property. Evan?
There was a primary residence there. I tore the old barn and house down, and someday I'd like to rebuild a house there, but for the meantime, I'd like a pole barn just for general storage use, and when I do build, have a secure building on the property, I guess.
It currently has a barn on there, right?
Yes, there's currently a 70s era barn on the property.
Probably a little older.
It's in tough
What's
shape.
that?
It's a little bit older than that, it's probably back in the 40s, it's
Right.
a horse barn, if you will.
Yeah.
The rescue, when they owned the property, they had a pole barn put up probably in the 70s. That was 30 by 60, very poor condition. When he took the house down, he decided it was money well spent to take that down rather than rehab it, put something up in its place. So the location's changed, but he's just asking to put back another building like what was currently there,
Right.
or was previously there, I should say.
You said your plan is eventually to build a house there?
Within the next 5 years, I'm going to.
We're gonna have to schedule a public hearing for this. It may or may not have to go to the county. The county's enacted new regulations on this. The key to it is whether or not they've approved our approval yet. I'll find that out tomorrow, but that has no bearing on you guys, it's just paperwork that I have to send. Public hearing will be scheduled a month from now. What's our April meeting? Our May meeting. I don't know.
So that's going to be the 16th of May.
16th of May.
(6205) East Bethany Road.
Yes. Okay, it's a 64 by 32, 16 foot, open, second floor.
Nothing at this point, I think, behind that. Just
It's a simple pole barn, so nothing fancy.
Where do you live in relation to this
I
property?
currently live in Wyoming.
Can I make a request that the secretary find the minutes from the property on Horseshoe Lake Road where we had a similar
Correct.
to reference at this meeting? I do not remember the property owner's name.
Where there was no existing.
Yeah,
Right.
it's,
What address was that?
It was on Horseshoe Lake Road and it was probably 2019. Was it
Are
that
you
long?
sure?
2019.
yes.
Am I sure what?
It was the guy who owned Will's carpet store.
No, it's not.
That's over.
He's a
They
school bus.
gave him a year to put a house up.
He's a school bus driver, the guy that,
I'm just saying this was a different,
yeah.
Looks on the street.
Like
I can't think of what his name is.
and everything.
Uh,
And there's others too.
We can pull
This
the,
is
we can
not
pull the
first
paperwork.
one. And there are reasons.
Oh, I know what it is.
Can get
What?
ugly.
No, I know, it's, yeah. Jerry's still working with him because he's building a house now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I would like to be able to reference those minutes and our findings and final vote at the next meeting.
Right, I
Will
believe,
this be CDA minutes?
I believe we put a stipulation in there of 24 months, I believe, which.
24 months to pull a building permit for a home, is that, can everybody go with this one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
And he has built, now has the house under construction, so.
There was also one on Route 33, but this was quite a ways back. They wanted to build a Quonset hut, and it was actually kind of adjacent to the solar. I think we
Mike,
denied
can I ask you a
that.
question?
Sure.
If times keep going the way they are, is there anything in the building code or zoning here in Stafford that says you can't build a barn dominium? Let's say the cost of square foot for stick-built houses keep going the way they are. Many towns allow these barn dominiums to be built, which is a pole barn with converted living space in it.
My uncle has lived in a house that was
I
supposed to be
didn't know
a
if there's
garage
anything,
for
if you guys
decades.
here at the zoning board would know if there's anything in the town of
No.
Stafford's building code that would not allow that to happen. Because that could become a possibility for him to have
Right.
to be put against him that he has to pull a building permit in 2 years and the times we're in, that may never happen. So
Right.
rather than have to revisit.
Well,
this
what-
later on.
Right, and that's exactly what we told the other gentleman, is that if there was a legitimate reason why he couldn't be under construction within 2 years, he could come back here again.
Okay.
And can I also make the point too that, you don't have to follow any precedent with these
No.
situations, so it's really case by case.
Okay.
So it's definitely good to look at, how we approached the last one, but we don't have to follow the same.
There's nothing in the
But-
language because he's putting back what would, actually, he's better the setback from the road and he meets his side and his rear setbacks.
See, yes, the problem is that Stafford and Leroy are the only two communities in the county that have this as a stipulation, that you have to have a primary structure to build a secondary structure. Not that this is gonna help today, but one of the things that has been brought up is, in the town, is that to look at all of our ordinances right now, to see which ones might be able to be amended, which ones might be able to be changed, which ones might be able to eliminated. And I can't find, no one has been able to tell me. There must have been a reason at some point in time that Stafford enacted this, that you had to have a primary structure. Because it doesn't, it prevents people from buying a piece of property and building a barn on it to build a house, even, technically. If you want to have something to store your equipment in.
Well, that's pretty common, yeah.
Yeah,
That's pretty common.
right. So, in theory, the only, in theory, it's in violation now because has a barn on a piece of property that there's no primary structure.
Mhm.
That can be explained because it's a non-conforming, pre-existing barn.
Mhm.
But to answer your other question, there is nothing in the law that says that you can't turn a barn into a house.
Well, with the times we're in, I think that's gonna be a real possibility for all this younger generation. You gotta feasibly look at what you can build and what you can afford to build. And there's no doubt about it, these barn dominiums, they're the best bang for the buck.
I think the only thing you might run into though is, I don't know this off the top of my head, what is the town's code relative to minimum square footage
Right.
for a residential type structure?
Right.
Yeah, and that would be a concern to be had, but something
Right.
like this. there's-
Which is, I believe, we went through it, the
With that same one.
same gentleman that we let build the barn also was trying to build the very smallest house he could on the piece of property. And there's nothing in the code that says what the minimum square footage of the house is. What it says is the minimum square footage for a kitchen, what the minimum square, so it gives you square footages, which you have to add all together to get your minimum for the house. But there's nothing that says, because we thought, and honestly at this time, it was an argument that several of us had, we thought that the minimum was 850 square foot, but we could find nothing anywhere that said 800 and.
Even in like the state, we were looking at the state level and we couldn't find anything.
No. But you could go through the minimum square footage per room. There's certain rooms that have to be a certain, so if you add these up, it gives you the minimum square footage of the house. So I mean, even if it's,
Right.
I think, I don't think you heard me, but my uncle next door, his house now was supposed to be a garage. And he turned it into a house, he got a variance.
Drywall that for it.
Yeah,
Yep.
and, it just, the windows have to be certain sizes and it has to be livable, so I don't think that's gonna be a problem.
And where I thought was obviously you gotta meet New York State energy code, building code, and so on and
Right.
so forth. I just was
Right.
curious from the town standpoint, what does the building code say for a one-family dwelling or single-family dwelling? If you
Yeah, the
will? What are
person
the-
best
what are the
to ask
specs
is
of
not
that?
here, our CEO.
right, and I think that either direction, and I'm sure Jerry talked to you about it, there has to be architectural drawings for it. That he's got, that's a stamped architectural drawing.
That is if he knows out of the gate that he's going to,
No,
because you don't need him for just a pole building, do you?
Yeah, you do.
I
You do?
yes,
Yeah.
That must be specific to Stafford only?
yeah.
They don't have to be anything fancy, I don't think.
Well, fancy is not the issue, it's an engineer set up a drawing stamp,
Oh,
it's
okay.
the dollar value.
Are you
But
building
not for
yourself?
agricultural, I don't think for agricultural. I don't think
Well,
so.
that's another good issue, because if this is an agricultural use, does that, I don't know, sit down here.
I don't think for just because we built some sheds and we literally
Right.
drew pictures and got the permit.
I know when I met with Jerry, he didn't say anything about getting stamped.
Yeah, I think,
I mean, he's very
Yeah.
aware of the whole.
I don't
lot
think
of
you
stuff,
need
so-
stamped for, and it's gonna be an agricultural storage
Yeah,
for
just
tractors and
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
right now, right?
Full storage.
Yeah.
So I'm curiosity, what are you putting for cold storage? What's gonna be in there?
Tractors.
Oh, no, just-
Oh, you meant, I wanted to,
No,
I
not-
thought
not
cold
like-
storage, I
no,
thought
just-
meant
yeah.
like conditioned storage.
No, no,
That's
just-
what I
Maybe
thought
you're gonna
too,
be,
yeah.
yeah, hey,
thinking
meat in there or
that.
something?
No,
I
no,
don't know.
no.
They'll be heating up, make the house out, they'll be heating there.
He's done nothing
What's
but
that?
improve
They'll be
the
heating there if you go put a house in there.
Yeah, there's no question about that. I mean, they took an abandoned house that was falling down,
It's been an eyesore,
cleaned it up,
and
right.
move forward from that point forward. We don't want any folks in Stafford to think that it's gonna be anything different than but improving from
Right.
this point forward. But
And going back to my original, at some point in time, something had to have happened in Stafford, that somebody built a barn and turned it into, basically a junkyard. That's the only thing I can think of.
I think that is the reasoning. They became like outdoor contractors' yards and ugly, and the thought is that
Right.
if you're not living there, you don't care what it looks like, but
Right.
your neighbors will. And also, I just saw an ad in the paper for a piece of property a realtor put in to have for your fun weekends, and I think there's a concern that
Mhm.
people, it'd be a place to
Recreational.
party and converge on weekends and could become a problem for the neighbors and the characters,
Right.
so.
But the town
I
I
think
came
that's
from,
also why
that's
they,
exactly why we put it on the books, was to prevent
Yeah.
turning into
like, here's the.
bulldozers and
Right.
backhoes and fire pits and trailers and all that, If you're living on the property, you're more likely, as you said, to
Yeah.
take some ownership and be aware.
We will have, Jerry will be here at our public hearing and stuff, so if there's any questions whatsoever.
and that is, when did you say, 16th?
16th of May, at 7 o'clock. Okay, you guys got any other questions?
No, we did. Thanks.
So you had to sit through.
The first hour,
But it was so interesting though, right?
Well, stay tuned, you guys are gonna be going through that pavilion pretty quick.
Yeah, it's going on.
I'll be there on Wednesday. There's I think there's a zoning board meeting tonight.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Wow.
What road is that gonna be on? Hopefully.
Shepherd, is that
Shepherd.
Shepherd? Okay.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Man, a couple of the neighbors are right here.
Yeah.
Who owns that property?
Doug Wade, Doug and Sue Wade, correct?
Yeah,
They don't live there, do they?
they do.
Oh, they do, okay.
Okay. Okay, we'll see you next month.
Okay. Wait, mind if we said it?
No?
Yeah, no, that's fine. New business, second application by Joshua Freegan to build a pole barn at 8978 Fargo Road. That would be in front of the principal resident that is already on the property. Joshua's not here.
Nobody?
I happened to be in the code enforcement's office the other day when he came in. Basically, what he's looking to do is, he has a flag lot on Fargo Road. He wants to build a pole barn. He can't build it behind his house because it's where his septic tank is located, septic system is located. So the only place he has to put it is in the front. But where this is located, you can't even see the house. You don't even know there's a house back there. I drove by it 3 times and still didn't see it, so,
Like ours.
Geothermal field there. too,
Yeah.
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Each on one side and geothermal on the other.
Yeah.
So is that the west side of Fargo?
Yes, I think so.
And is it must be like,
Yeah. It's behind his mother-in-law's house.
it must be somewhere near that barn that got converted to a house, that gorgeous thing,
Just before it.
just before it. Okay,
Yeah.
because that's where the railroad bed goes through.
We're gonna schedule that for a public hearing also.
May 16th?
May 16th, same one.
5:15, or 7:15?
Yes. And I will call Felipe tomorrow to find out if the county has approved our changes of their recommendations. Did everybody get a copy of the training session, the email from Barb?
Was that
May,
for the thing,
what's that?
right in Batavia?
Yes,
Yeah.
GCC?
Oh, are you talking about the
Harassment?
Humphrey?
No,
Oh,
no,
that.
no, 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 no,
This
no.
is like your in-service training?
Yes,
Yeah, I
yes.
didn't see anything from her.
Oh, okay.
But is yours already satisfied? Mine was satisfied for work.
Well, I did the harassment to her, but not the,
What's
This
this
is-
one?
this is
This is
in-service,
this is the
the
training
4
that
hours,
put on by
2 hours or whatever.
But it's,
Finger Lakes.
oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's,
It's at GCC.
hang on.
Isn't it like May 20th or something?
I'll tell you. in 2
I
seconds.
have it in my email.
I guess what I need to know is,
Thank you.
who is, who's interested in going to that training? Because we have to, I'll try to register everybody that wants to go. Here, this one.
Is it virtual? No.
No,
May 13th, Friday, May 13th, 9 to 4 at GCC. I got it from Felipe and from someone else.
that's from Barb.
Is that the only one they offer this year, or is there anything in the fall?
They do one in the fall, but it's usually at Burgundy Basin Inn.
Yeah,
That one too.
this is,
I don't think the Burgundy base is open anymore.
then I won't have it there.
You guys are coming on my way. I just want to thank you guys for all your time and attention on this. Obviously, the project's not done, we're moving over to the town board, but I want to thank you for, 6 months of attention, due diligence, asking questions, and putting up with it.
And
So I appreciate it, and we'll be over at the town board, and I'll be out of your hair.
the hoops, you're just starting.
Just starting.
You're just starting the hoops to jump through.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Good luck to you, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Okay, it's, workshop is May 13th. Is anybody interested in going to that?
What time is it?
It starts at 8:30 in the morning, and goes to 4:30 in the afternoon. It's that all day, but you don't have to be there for the entire day.
Can somebody watch my 3-month-old?
Oh, I love babies.
Yeah, we can take her. Did you just volunteer?
I think he did.
I did, he went. I said, bring it.
You can send that up, Mike, I'm probably signing for that, just because I don't want to go all the way that way, if I can avoid it.
Okay,
But there's one in Batavia.
that's the one.
That's the
And
one
this is a
at the
GCC.
hotel?
Oh.
No, it's not there anymore.
Oh, they're not
They're having it at GCC now.
So that's the same
Same,
one?
same group.
Okay, all right, I guess I have to do it then.
Okay.
There are other options you could do.
There are? What are the other ones?
Well,
They have all
stuff
kinds
that
of,
comes through your email.
Yeah, there's some virtual stuff too,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I think I might wait for something like
Okay.
that. Okay.
Jim,
I don't know of any offhand,
you wait?
Yeah, there's the problem.
because we already said the,
You have to leave them? No.
actually, there is a large scale, Jack,
Yeah.
there's a large scale agrivoltaics, beekeeping and pollinators on utility scale solar facilities.
That's a mouthful.
Virtual.
Decide what that means.
Did you say beekeeper?
Yeah,
Whoa, you'd like that.
I already missed it, never mind.
never mind, it was, I think it was today, wasn't it?
The 12th.
Oh,
There's stuff all the time, but you gotta check your email. I'll
Yeah.
try to let you know if I.
Yeah, let me know if you see something. That'd be great.
does Barb have your email address? She does, okay.
Once in a great while, I'll get something from her, but, you know, nothing on a regular basis. I don't know if she has a weekly.
It says it's from Walt still.
Yes, well, it's town clerk,
TC staff at.
TC
Yeah,
staff.
I think, you know, I think I get, I don't really find getting the training now.
Okay,
But,
Well, I have your email, Tim. Did you get the minutes? or-
no, I did not, but I'll give it to her.
Yeah, you better, because I sent the minutes out to everybody, and I want to make sure you get a copy.
They were in the box, right?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, see, I stopped in Friday to pick up everything.
But I also sent them out electronically.
Town's not open.
Yeah, closed.
Yeah, I'll add you.
Are you gonna have enough, are you gonna be okay with the training, that you don't have to go to this one?
I don't know, when's our deadline?
We do it by the end of the year.
Yeah. We're fine.
I'd rather not do it.
Okay, that's fine.
I just do a lot of work.
I mean, we've got a fall one, so.
I'd rather go to that Wilkett.
I thought you were going to that.
I didn't sign up yet. It's been really, really rough at work. It's been really, really rough everywhere.
Well, you do know, I'm sure that
haven't committed so
Steve,
much money.
Steve told you that.
That you can get paid for.
Yeah, 2 of your questions have been
Yep.
answered, so
I'm trying to find that Wilkett symposium. I know it's coming up. They keep advertising.
I think it's next week.
It's been very, very rough at work and it's hard for me to even pot.
So you would-
a day.
You're a possible.
Yes.
Okay, okay. I will double check tomorrow and make sure that Barb has your email address. And I'll try to get us signed up.
You did.
So make sure you get your certificates and everything to Barb. If I don't,
Yeah, so
They just, they mail them automatically too. Okay. Does anybody else have anything for the meeting? Anything else for the meeting? No, sir. Somebody want to make a motion to close?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.